What's up, theorists? Welcome back to Theory Hammer. I am your incredibly attractive and fit host, Kevbot, and in today's episode, we're going to be taking a tactical look at another Chaos army. It's the Death Guard today. And so in this review, we are going to be talking about all the different units from the Death Guard that we care about, their points values, why they're good, how they help the army, and how in conjunction you can use them to lead your Death Guard to victory. And so overall, what's the army do? What do we got? What are we working with here? Well, to sum things up, you're going to have a thick amount of bodies, and you're going to want to get into combat because you don't have a lot of shooting. You do hit hard in combat. You actually really do have a good army rule. I'm just kidding about them being terrible. Although they weren't released, they can kind of threat overload you with a lot of cheap little battle line guys. They've got pretty good strats, but they're slow as hell. They rely on transports, they're poor at shooting, no anti-tank shooting like whatsoever, and they only have a couple of good enhancements. And so we're going to tee it right off with the enhancements themselves. Here we go, this is what they got. The Living Plague is 20 points. It's on a Death Guard model only. It adds 3 inches to the range of your aura abilities, which includes Nurgle's Gift. You have the Droning, which is 10 points. Don't worry about that one, it's fucking terrible. You got Deadly Pathogen, that's 15 points, and this is your run-of-the-mill, makes your melee better. Add 1 to the strength and attacks characteristic of the melee weapons. If you're in range of an infected objective marker, you add 2 to the strength and attacks characteristics instead. 15 points, not a bad upgrade. Shamble Rot's the last one. Each time the bearer's unit is selected as a target of an enemy unit's charge, they are -2 to their charge roll. Kinda weird. 25 points is way too expensive for that, and it's bad so you can forget it exists. And that's all their enhancements. They don't got shit. But what they do have is a good army rule and a couple of good stratagems. Before we go over the stratagems, let's go over the army rule. If your army faction Death Guard, while an enemy unit is within contagion range, they subtract 1 from the toughness characteristic of models in their unit, and the contagion range gets bigger. The farts that you let out get, the cloud of fart is just bigger and bigger every turn. Turn 1 it's 3 inches, turn 2 it's 6 inches, turn 3 and onward it's 9 inches. And so your detachment rule kind of plays off this. You can pick 1 of 3 different abilities at the declare battle formation step, and then all models in your army get the ability. The first one is that Skull Squirm Blight, and then that is probably one of the better ones. They're all really good. You worsen the opponent's ballistic skill and weapon skill by 1 while they're within your contagion range. You got this Rattle Joint Og. While an enemy unit is within contagion range, you worsen their save characteristic by 1. That's really good as well. And then you have the Soul Rot, which subtracts 1 from their OC to a minimum of 1, but still really, really good if you're playing against an army that's meant to just play the objective game. Fuck it, just make them -1 OC, the whole army. Playing against Black Templar, they have a bunch of battle line units that are OC 2. Well, now they're OC 1, so that'll help against them. And then on top of this, if you control an objective marker at the end of your command phase, and a Death Guard unit is within range of it, that objective marker becomes infected, and while it's infected, it's a contagion, like it gives you contagion. So that's pretty cool. And so now that we know those, we know the army rule, we know the enhancements, we know the detachment rule, what are their stratagems? Ferric Blight is the first one. It's a battle tactics in your shooting phase. You target a Death Guard army that hasn't shot or fought, and then until the end of the phase, you get +1 to your armor penetration, and if the target of the attack is within contagion range of an infected objective marker and a critical wound discord, you get +2 AP instead. So the extra bit there is just nice to have, but hard to remember. The Sanguinous Flux is the next one. This is a battle tactics for 1 CP that happens in the fight phase. You pick a unit that has not been selected to fight yet, and then until the end of the phase, you get Sustained Hits 1. If you're within range of an infected objective, that's hard to say, you become Sustained Hits 2 instead, which is easier to get some extra damage from than is the Ferric Blight, because having Sustained Hits 2 on something is real good. And then you got Disgustingly Resilient. You'll recognize the name of this from older editions, 2 CP, Battle Tactics. Pick a unit from your army that was the target of an enemy attacks, and you subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of the attacks that are coming at you. So that's one of the best ones that you got. -1 damage, always really good, especially on things like Terminators, or things such as that are already pretty tanky. Gift of Decay is 1 CP, it's in your command phase. Target a Death Guard model in your army, it regains D3 lost wounds. If it's in contagion range, just auto gains 3 of an infected objective marker. So Boil Blight is your next one, it's in your shooting phase. You pick a Death Guard unit from your army, and then 1 enemy unit within contagion range of your unit that you picked. Anything else that shoots the enemy unit gets heavy and ignores cover. So So this is basically meant to be used on the crawlers, the Plague Burst crawlers. Give them heavy, give them ignores cover, then they actually become pretty decent. And they are one of the units that we'll talk about momentarily, so stay tuned for that. The last one that we got is Cloud of Flies. This is 1 CP strategic ploy. It's in your opponent's shooting phase just after they select the targets. You pick a unit that was the target of their attacks, and then you gain stealth. Not great. And so that's what you got for your stratagems. There's some good ones, there's some bad ones, there's some stinky ones, all the things. But all of them have some play. Like the first one, getting +1 armor penetration for shooting or combat, that's great. Put a bunch of Terminators into combat, give them +1 AP, fuck some shit up, or do the same thing with Sanguinis Flux. Get sustained hits 2 on whatever you need to fight with, because that's specifically the fight phase. Be super durable with Disgustingly Resilient, -1 damage. That's a pretty rare thing to get as a stratagem. Regain wounds is okay. Making your Plague Burst crawlers useful is pretty good as well, because they're not a bad unit. And then you got your Cloud of Flies, which is probably the worst? One of the worst. So now that we've talked about that, let's go over some of the data sheets that are going to work with your army. What are you going to bring in a Death Guard army? We know the army rule, we know the detachment rule. What sort of units are going to benefit from that the most? The Stink Bomber himself is first, the Biologist Putrefier. 50 points, leads Plague Marines and can lead them even if there's another leader already attached, just can't be another one of these guys. This guy gives the unit that he's leading lethal hits, and then each time they score a critical hit, it happens on a 5 or a 6. Your unit already will have critical or lethal hits in combat, but this will give it to your guns. And then in combat, all of them will be proccing on 5s, and then the ones that get it for shooting, they also proc on 5s. So this guy's great for 50 points. He really helps your army because a lot of your weapons are going to have lethal hits. That's kind of the shtick of the Plague Marines. They don't get a lot of sustained hits. Instead, they get lethal hits because it's supposed to represent, like, their decay. Now, he also has Explosive Maladies. This was recently changed in the balanced data slate. He used to be able to have 3 of these guys and then just truck 3 different grenades, 3 different things, but you can't do that anymore because it's in your shooting phase and you can select 1 model from your army with its ability to target, with the grenade strat for 0 CP, and you can do so even if you've already done it. This didn't used to say you can select 1 model from your army, so that was recently changed. But still pretty damn good. Allows you to throw the grenade strat for a second time, and that's pretty good. Extra mortal wounds for free is always good. And so for 50 points, he's just a really good include in that unit. He's got Hyper Blight Grenades, so they're awesome. That's his ranged weapon. It's D6 shots, strength 5, AP 1, and 2 damage, with lethal hits that are going to then proc on 5s. It has Assault as well, so he adds an Assault weapon to your unit, which allows them to advance and do actions, which we all love, don't we, folks? Blight Lords are pretty good, because they are only 330 points. You can make a -1 damage. They got toughness 6 instead of toughness 5. 3 wounds, 4 pinball. Just a real tanky unit for their points. Although, just not a whole lot of damage output, because in combat, they've only got Bubonic Blades. They're just 1 damage. They do have 4 attacks with lethals, but not great. They got a Flail, Corruption, 6 attacks, strength 5, AP 1 damage, 2 with lethals. They skirmish very well with lighter infantry and other things like Space Marines, but not other Terminators. They do not skirmish well with heavier infantry, but they're still super duper good for their points cost, and so you should definitely put them in your list. You can have these guys deep striking in, going on to objectives, sitting there at toughness 6, and you can kind of, like I said in the beginning, you can kind of just overload because a lot of the units in the army are cheap. Plague Marines I think are 80 points, they might be 85, which we'll get onto in a moment, but these guys are only 330 or 165, so you can take 3 units of 5 even, deep strike them around, just try to get points with them. Now your other squad of Terminators, which is your Death Shroud Terminators, they're going to be 250 points for 6. They all have a Flamer now, which is interesting. It's anti-infantry 4+, so it's always going to wound them on 4s, D6 shots is in 12-inch range, and the Sergeant can get an extra one. So you can actually put 7 Flamers in this unit. They're pretty damn good in combat. They're all strength 8, AP 2, and 2 damage. They all have like a Power Fist with lethal hits, and 4 attacks hitting on 2s. And it also has a sweep profile, which is pretty nice to have. It's 6 attacks, strength 5, AP 0, 1 damage. Also with lethal hits. They're -1 to be wounded. They have the same profile, so they're T6 with 3 wounds and a 4 pinvuln, and 2 up saves, of course. Not that I really need to mention that. But for a pretty durable unit of Terminators that hits a lot harder in combat than your Blight Lords, the Death Shroud are going to be a nice pickup and a nice thing to include with them. Because then you can have 2 units of Terminators there. Maybe just take 3 mans of Death Shroud, kind of keep their points low at 125 for 3, and maybe use them to supplement the damage and the durability of your Blight Lords at the 330 point mark. So for basically 450 points, you can have 13 Terminators, or for 290 points, you can have 8 Terminators, 5 regulars, 3 Death Shroud, kind of chilling around each other, helping each other out that way. The Death Guard Demon Prince is interesting for 160 points because he gives all your infantry within contagion range of him a 6-up Feel No Pain. So only 3 inches on turn 1, but if you give him that upgrade, the enhancement, you can increase that by 3 inches. So on turn 1, you can have a 6-inch aura. On turn 2, you can have a 9-inch. On turn 3, you can have a 12-inch. Of just 6-up Feel No Pain. He himself isn't going to do a whole lot. He's got a Flamer that's like just a heavy Flamer with anti-infantry 2-up as his ranged weapons. He's got his Combat, which doesn't even get lethal hits. Strength 8, AP 2, 3 damage with 6 attacks on 2s. But for 160 points, I think he's probably good, just because he can give you that 6-up Feel No Pain, and that on Terminators starts making them just egregiously durable when combined with that -1 damage. The Helper is another really good unit, because this thing, whatever it shoots at, counts as being within contagion range. So if you are giving something, if your contagion range ability is to like be -1 to their AP, or to subtract 1 from their OC, this thing shoots at you, and it just does whatever that is. It does whatever you picked. So what you're going to do with this thing, most likely, is give it the heavy bolter and probably the missile launcher. That way you can get at least 4 shots on a unit to try to get a hit on it, because once you get a hit on it, that's when your ability kicks in, and that unit counts as being in contagion range of this model. It also has like a little mini tank shock. Each time it ends a charge move on a 2-up, the enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, so that's kind of cool as well. It's 140 points, but the fact that it can make you within contagion range makes it awesome. So you might even take 2 of these things, because when you're combining these with Plague Burst Crawlers, which are also pretty cheap, these things can get the line of sight that they need on their target. The Plague Burst Crawlers can then shoot that target, counting it as being in contagion range, so hopefully, you know, -1 of their armor save already. With the strat, you can ignore cover, and you can get heavy, so you can be Strength 8, AP 1, Damage 2 with lethals, but then you're ignoring cover, you're +1 to hit, and the armor save is worse anyway. The Bloat Drones are an interesting choice for only 100 points. They are eligible to shoot and declare a charge in which they fell back. They're probably going to have 2 Plague Spitters, which are Strength 6, AP 1, and Damage 1, and they're a Flamer, but they're anti-infantry 2+. And because these move 10 inches, they're toughness 9 with a 10 wound profile. Not the most durable unit, but for only 100 points, not a bad unit. Although you might just keep the Flesh Mower, because the Flesh Mower is going to give it 10 attacks with lethal at Strength 7, AP 1, and Damage 2. And again, for 100 points, it's kind of just annoying to deal with, but not amazing. The Foul Blightspawn is really good, though. He is kind of amazing, because he is also only 50 points, like your Biologus Putrefier guy, and he gives the whole unit frights first with his putrefying stink. He smells so goddamn bad, like the gamers in your gamer store, that like when you go into that store, you immediately want to get out of there because you feel like you're going to throw up. He's also got a Plague Spewer, which is a Flamer that's Strength 7, AP 2, and Damage 2 with Anti-Infantry 2-up. Hell yeah. Basic range, basic amount of shots there, 12-inch range, D6 shots. Combat, he's nothing cool, but giving you fights first with all those Plague Fists in your squad, plus having this cool Flamer thing, for 50 points, he's going right in there. The Lord of Virulence is pretty interesting because he basically gives you that stratagem to make your Plague Burst Crawlers better, just right on his datasheet. Each time a friendly Death Guard model makes an attack with a blast weapon that targets a unit that is visible to this model, add 1 to the hit roll and add 1 to the attack. And so it may actually be easier to use because the stratagem requires your unit to be with, the way that works is you pick one of your units, and then you pick an enemy unit within contagion range of your unit, and then your other army stuff gets heavy and ignores cover. With this guy, he basically gives you heavy because he adds 1 to your hit roll, and the attack has ignores cover. In addition, if he's leading a unit, models in that unit reroll their wounds with their range attacks. So those 7 Flamers that are anti-infantry, I think 4-up, they all get to reroll their wounds, which is pretty nice. He himself has a Power Fist, he's 100 points, he's real tanky with 6 wounds, toughness 6, and a 4-up invuln, and he's got a twin, like, heavy Flamer thing. So anti-infantry 2-up, strength 5, AP 1, damage 1, but twin linked, so he's rerolling wounds with it. And then in combat, he's got 5 attacks with his lethal hits Power Fist. Pretty nice to lead some Death Shroud with. Take a unit of 6 with this guy, gives all their Flamers rerolls to wound, allows your Plague Burst Crawlers in the background to ignore cover and get +1 to hit, because they don't already have heavy. just so you know. So let's talk about those next, since I've been talking about them so damn much. Plague Burst Crawler. Toughness 10, 12 wounds, 5 up invuln. Its ranged weapon is that Plague Burst Mortar, that's the indirect one. So that's going to get Ignores Cover, and that's going to get +1 to hit because of your Lord of Virulence or because of the stratagem. Strength 8, AP 1, damage 2 with D6 +3 blast shots with lethal. So you pop 3 of these things into your list, you know, they're maybe only 2 now that they're 180 points. They used to be 165, so they're 15 points more expensive, but 2 or 3 of them, it's going to be where it's at. Let's just say you have 3 for the sake of math here, and you're putting out 9 plus 3d6 shots with +1 to hit and indirect, and Ignores Cover, with blast, if that matters at some capacity, with lethal hits. So not bad, and then you can also give them Plague Spitters, or you can keep the Entropy Cannon, which is like a las cannon, although it's not strength 12. It is lethal, but it's strength 10 AP3, D6 +1 damage. The Plague Spitter is the same thing that the drone gets. It's going to be anti-infantry 2 up with strength 6 AP1, damage 1. And it's just a flamer, but it can take 2 of them. And its ability is that if it shoots an infantry with its Plague Burst Mortar, they have to take a Battle Shock test. Terrible ability, but when it actually works out in your favor, because you're shooting at a unit that's on an objective that you can't see, that actually might matter. Or if it's on a unit that really needs a strat cast on it soon, now it can't. The Plague Marines themselves are another unit that went up in points with the balanced data slate. They are 90 points for 5 or 180 for 10. For every 5, you get 2 Power Fists, another Power Fist, so 3 Power Fists, a Blight Launcher, and a Plague Spear. And as long as these guys are within range of an objective marker I control, if they take a Battle Shock test, they add 1 to the test. Because they're Leadership 6, they're basically never going to fail. They're T5 with 2 wounds. For 80 points, that's pretty awesome. For 90 points, yeah, it's still pretty awesome, I guess. It's priced right, I think. Just a shame it had to go up. The ranged weapons are garbage, don't worry about them. All you really care about is their combat, which is going to be those heavy plague weapons, those Power Fists with lethal hits. So take a bunch of units of these guys, put the Flamer dudes in the unit, put the Grenades dudes in their unit, and they are going to be rocking out with 5 Power Fists and a 10-man unit. All lethal hits, all fighting first, maybe -1 damage if you need it. So that's all pretty cool. Your Poxwalkers are another pretty interesting unit. They got a 5-up Fiona Pain with toughness 4, and they're only 5 points apiece, so you can take a unit of 20 of these things for 100 points. They can't really do too much, they're super slow with a 4-inch move, but because they're so durable, they've got a 5-up Fiona Pain and 4 toughness. They're pretty good for holding your backfield objective, so you might just take 1 unit of these guys, and then maybe you put Typhus with them or something. He gives them -1 to be hit, although if Typhus himself, I don't really like that much. But he can combo pretty well with Death Shroud and stuff, because the Death Shroud are -1 to be wounded. If he attaches to them, they're now -1 to be hit. You can give them -1 damage with the strat. And then in combat, he is pretty slicey. He's got 5 attacks with lethals, strength 9, AP2, damage 3. So he ain't bad, but he ain't great. Mortarion is going to be the last one up here. Toughness 12 with 16 wounds, so he's a Land Raider profile. He's got a 2-up save, so a Land Raider profile. But he has a 4-up invuln, unlike a Land Raider. He's got some cool shooting, I guess. It's a Dev Wound blast thing that's psychic. He's also got his pistol, which is sustained hits D3, strength 9, AP3, and damage 3. Just 1 shot, though. He has a 5-up Feel No Pain, so he's pretty hard to kill. You can make him -1 damage. Death Guard units within 6 of him ignore modifiers to their characteristics and tests. And then he gets to pick 1 of 3 abilities because he is a Primarch after all. And all the Primarch type models all have a thing like this. So he either picks the Miasma of Pestilence, which gives all of your guys within 6 inches of him cover against ranged attacks. Diseased Influence gives everybody within 6 inches reroll wounds of 1. And then Toxic Presence adds 3 inches to the contagion range of models within 12 of this guy. And so they're all pretty good. He's only 325 points, but he's kind of a slacker. He's only got 5 attacks in combat with lethal hits, strength 14, AP 3, and 4 damage flat, or he's got some sweeps, which there they are. But for 325 points, I mean, he's less points than Lionel Johnson. He's less points than anything, like any equivalent model. And so he's pretty damn good, just for a beat stick unit that can give some buffs to your army. Nice target for a lot of your stratagems, and pretty good. So overall, that's what I see from this army. I see a lot of cheap units that are actually pretty durable, and I think that you just capitalize on that. I think you just play with as many bodies as you can, probably stick them in Rhinos, probably take Death Shroud, probably take Blight Lords, and just get as many of them on the table as you can. Because when you're that durable and you're that cheap, you don't really need to be doing a whole lot of damage. You just need to be sitting on the objectives. The opponent will come to you, you will end up doing damage to them in return, but as long as they're doing less damage to you than you're doing to them, that's all that matters. And with your ability to take away or to subtract from their save, with your ability to subtract from their OC, and these are all things you choose pre-game, it gives you a lot of options and it gives you a lot of versatility. And I always really like armies that give you those things. Death Guard are one of the few Chaos armies that I actually like because they're kind of memey. But in this edition, at least right now, they actually do have a lot of power. Cheap units, good combat, durability. They just lack speed, but that's made up for by the Rhinos, or like deep striking in with Terminators. You can get around those problems a lot of the times if your army is slow. Generally, GW will give you something that'll either be a transport or it'll be Sagittars that are stupid and let you scout, or things along those lines. They'll give you the ability to deep strike, they'll give you the ability to pick up units, put them back somewhere else, something like that. Usually you have some sort of movement shenanigans that you can use with your army, but not always. And this is one of them. You don't have anything special, you just get to use your transports. But I think that's enough. And I think that's going to do it. If you made it till the end here, the two of you that are still watching, thanks so much. Be sure to hit that like button, be sure to corrupt the shit out of it. Subscribe to Theory Hammer, hit Nurgle's bell, because why wouldn't you do that right now? I mean, that's so thematic in this episode. Leave a comment down below telling us what you think about the Death Guard. Let me know anything that I missed, and then check out our other videos as well. We have all kinds of content, and we make new content regularly. So until next time, guys, please go take a fucking shower, and I will see you in the next one.